So let me introduce our next lecturer. Wojtek Bosecki is a leading expert in the field of circular economy in the Central and Eastern European region. He co-founded a successful circular economy NGO in the Czechia and Slovakia and worked on related issues in the European Parliament. He currently works as Circle Economies Associate focused on Nordics and the CEE. Wojtek is also a chairman of a steering committee for the circular economy at the City of Prague and advises a number of organizations. He is a member of the international groups such as Circular Economy Club and the Visegrad for Sustainability. So Wojtek, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Radka, and thank you for that introduction. I don't think I have to add anything to that, and it's a great pleasure to be here at this such an interesting and also important venue. I hope, Radka, can you just nod that you can hear me and see my slides? Great, amazing. So, since I've been already introduced, I think I can jump right to the topic. Today, in my session, which, as Radka mentioned, will be divided into two parts with a short break in between, I will focus on circular economy. It might sound like gibberish to you at this moment, but I hope at the end of this session, you will be much more familiar. What is it? Why do we need it? And what can you do about it? And that's pretty much the goal of today. The outline is following, just so you know what's expecting. First, I have a short exercise for you all in Slido, and I will tell you a little bit more about it in just a second. But I will mostly focus in the first part, in the first 45 minutes, on general introduction about what's happening today with resources and waste, what is circular economy, how can it help, and then I would like to leave space for Q&As, but also the Slido exercises that I'll be using from time to time. I will always let you know, and it's quite simple to use. And then we'll have that break, and then in the second part of the session, I will follow up with more concentrated exercise and know-how about why our business is doing it, what are they doing, what is in it for you, how can you get engaged, while also leaving space for questions and answers. So about the session and how you can get engaged throughout the session, I would encourage you to write all your questions down or write them in the chat in the Zoom. Radka will be taking care of that. I will be able to answer them always at the end of the session, but I will leave plenty of space to address that. And I really encourage all of you to ask whatever you have on your mind. I think that's the best way, just to engage with each other. So I will be talking, but then write it down. We will keep track of it and we will address it at the end of each sessions. There are two sessions. It ends at 3 and it starts now. And it starts with a Slido. So do you have a phone next to you, all of you? If it's a smartphone, please pick it up and write down Slido to your Google. You can see it here as well. Radka, can you see that Slido slide now? Can you just say something? I don't see you now. Can you just turn on your mic and tell me?
Yes, we see it. So we see the code here.
Yeah.
And we see the slide at slido.com. Yes.
Right. So please, all of you, just type down slido.com. You can do it from your phone or from your laptop. And it will ask you only to write down that code, 904463. So type it down and you should be now entered into the session. And there are a couple of things that I'm curious about, but also to spark your inspiration and get you acquainted with a Slido. We will be starting with the first question, which is pretty simple. What did you throw away today? And you can just write down what was it and press enter. And then we have first already respondent talking about paper bag. So get familiar with it, try it out, write it down, and you will see that that word cloud is just getting bigger and bigger. Is someone having troubles with connecting to Slido? If so, turn on your mic, please.
We are not getting anything in the chat, so if you have any problems, just write down in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, we needed a little bit more respondents. I think there's more than 40 of us and 11 votes so far, but it's coming. I can see some interesting things popping up, mostly plastic, eggshells, some organic waste. We have 15 votes. I will leave for the rest to get engaged. Let's give it one more second before we wrap this up. And again, I don't see the chat, so if some of you are having troubles using Slido, please open your mic and tell us now, and we can help you.
Don't worry, we are sharing the web page, so some of people had problems, but they are, I'm sure, now resolving it.
Okay. Great, thanks. Interesting. Plastic is definitely winning. A couple condoms as well, not just one. And let me move on to another question now. This was just to warm you up, but now this is a question to you all. Do you know how much waste in your household do you produce every day per capita? This is really about one person. It's kind of the average in the EU. Pick one option and let us know. Do you see how it's changing? Do you see the replies coming in?
Yes.
Great. Then it's all working. We have 15 votes. Let's give it 30 seconds. How much waste do you produce every day? What do you think? Let us know. Okay, thank you. So I think you were actually really close. The correct answer was 1 to 1.5 kilograms of waste per capita a day in the EU. Of course, that number differs. It can be higher if you live in the US, and it can be much, much, much lower if you live in the countries of Global South. And you know, it could also be, if you're doing a great job at home, you can be definitely throwing less than 1 kilogram a day. So maybe some of you were actually right, and that estimate is correct, but the total average in the EU is indeed about 1.2 kilograms per capita per day. All of us. Imagine the whole world doing that at the same time every day. Crazy, right? Now, just the last question for you to share with me. What would you like to take with you after this session? Just write down whatever comes up to your mind. I'm curious to know, and I will try to take it into account for the rest of the session. Just shoot, it's anonymous. We're curious to know. Knowledge, new info. That's good news because that's there. My number. I'll get you my email afterwards. Knowledge. Practices. Awesome. We have 9 votes. Usually we got up to 20, so I'll wait. there's plenty of good practices in here. So that's good to know that you're interested in that. I think that's a good match. And thanks again for using the Slido. We are on average with 20 users. So I'll always take that into account. And one more question. What type of organization do you represent today? Are you self-employed? Are you working in the academia? Are you a startup? Let us know. I'm so curious to learn. You can choose more options. You know, maybe you're wearing more hats than just one. Awesome. So you can see most of all we have self-employed, NGOs, SMEs, pretty much the same, some startups, some corporates, some others. No one from academia and no one from the government. Interesting. Thanks for sharing. 20 respondents. I will move on. Last question. What country are you from? Just shoot. Let's give it 30 seconds and then I'm gonna start with my presentation. Far we have the whole Europe from west to south to east. That's amazing. A lot of Macedonians. What do you say? Dobrodošli? Awesome. We're up at 20 again. So, and that's it. Thank you. I hope it warmed you up. And now I'm gonna jump to the slides and we'll get back to Slido a couple times during the day. So be ready. It's still the same code. But since all of you said, hey, actually, I wanna learn something about circular economy, let me tell you what is it and why we should be all working on it. I wanna start with my own personal motivation to dedicate to that topic. And that, you know, when I came to the Netherlands to do my master's there, I was stunned by some of the facts that are just simple facts and unavoidable, which will have a major impact on what's going to happen in the world with our planet, with our people, with our resources. And I think that one of the key things that I urge everyone to realize that we are almost 8 billion people on this planet now. When I was born, it was, I think, 4 billion or 7 or 5 billion. And in the next 30 years, there will be 2 more billion people on top of 8. So in 2050, it is expected that there will be 10 billion people living on this planet. But we only have one planet, right? And we're already seeing that amount of people and their growing purchasing power, the quality of life is increasing, means we consume more. And I ran out of my disk space. And that means that, we're running out of stuff. We're putting a lot of pressure on the local ecosystems, but we're also having better and better lives. So it's 2 sides of the same coin. But according to some estimates, already today, we are consuming more than the planet is able to provide in a sustainable manner. Some research suggests that today we're using we need almost 2 planets to sustain our needs. And if you live in Sweden or Norway, if everyone lived like Sweden, we would need 5 planets to sustain all the needs. Everyone needs to have 2 cars, 2 houses, a boat, fly to Bahamas, and that's having an impact. And we need to face that, and we need to redesign the way we're moving towards our future. Otherwise, we're facing some harsh facts ahead of us. And now, what's even more interesting about today's world is that we are not so good with working with what we have, with all the resources that the planet is providing us. I think that our age is defined by the amount of waste that we produce. We are in some parts of the world literally drowning in waste. You saw that from that quiz that we took. All of us on average produce 1 kilogram of waste per day per capita. So imagine that in a year, that's 360 kilograms. Imagine that, your husband or kids are the same, and then add it up to those 8 billion people. And then you get those crazy numbers. For example, in the EU, we produced about 2.5 billion tons of waste every year, and only half of that amount is recycled. Those 2.5 billion tons of waste, it's not just the waste that you produce in your household. That's important to realize. Most of that waste is not coming from you, from your households, from your offices. It's coming from industries such as built environment, construction, demolition, mining, and manufacturing. Those produce the most waste. We're only a small part of that, but still it adds up. And then most of the world is used to treat that waste as a waste, just to dig it up, hide it, burn it, and throw it away. And that means that at one point, there'll be nothing to create stuff from, but also there'll be all those hills of landfills all around us. In fact, what's interesting fact is that in some landfills, there's a higher concentration of gold than in the gold mines. Waste is a precious resource. And the fact why is that we throw away a lot of electronics, cables, phones, laptops. Some of that ends up on landfills, and those components have precious metals in them. So when they did a research in European landfills, they found out that per cubic meter, there was more gold concentration in some of the landfills in Europe than in the gold mines in Africa. It's crazy. Our world is also really defined by large inefficiencies. So not only that we live in this take, make, waste economy where we extract resources on one part of the world, we turn them into products, and then we consume them and we throw them away, and then they go in a landfill or incineration, and sometimes they get recycled. We also are largely inefficient with working with what we have, what we consume on a daily basis. And I think cars are a great example. You know that an average car in the EU, once you buy it, 93% of its lifetime, it is parked. No one is using it. I'll say it again. Cars in Europe, they are parked 93% of the time when we own it. And that's crazy. And we all need a car. And they're just standing out, they're taking up the space, costing a lot of money, producing a lot of emissions. And it's just an example of larger inefficiencies that are connected to our system. And I think food is also an example of that. This is a story of a poor little cod fish that was caught at the coast of Britain, shipped to China to be processed and frozen and shipped back to the UK to be sold in a supermarket, which is 1 mile away from the place where the cod was caught, because it was 50 pennies cheaper. And we rely on those supply chains. Again, the fish is just one example of many. And you can see that that fish flew through Suez Canal. And I think you all remember what happened a couple of months ago when that canal got blocked because of one ship. Basically 20% of global trade got crippled. And these are the supply chains that are powering our global economies today. And we also, when we talk about circular economy, we need to take this into account and think differently about how do we get our stuff out there, how do we consume it, and where is the stuff coming from? Where is this all heading? Well, again, this is something that I was working in the European Union. And this is a mine of fertilizers in Morocco. Fertilizers are crucial for agriculture. So we need those mines. They mine, in this case, phosphorus. That is then put on our fields, in our soils, so the plants can grow bigger and faster. And Europe is super dependent on phosphate mines from only 2 or 3 countries, Russia, Morocco, and Tunisia. But we know that those mines, those phosphorus mines, will run out of their capacities in the next 80 years. We will not have a mineral phosphorus to use in our fields in the next couple of decades. And that's why European Union started with an initiative of putting phosphorus on a critical raw material list next to some rare metals. That list is getting bigger and bigger every year, and phosphates are just one of the examples of many. And now EU has a strategy how to close that loop locally, because there's a lot of phosphate in what we do as humans. We don't have to mine it in Morocco. This is an example of what happens with that phosphate when you treat it as waste and not as a resource. So this is US, and you can see the green graph, the green pictures is the phosphate and nitrogen that we're putting on our agricultural fields and lands, which is then accumulated in rivers that flow to Mississippi and Mexican Bay. And the red color is the US big cities, which also produce a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen from what we flush down to our toilet as humans. You know, there's a lot of phosphate and nitrogen in feces and urine, but all of that is getting taken up by the rivers and accumulated and then discarded here in Mexican Bay through the Mississippi River, which is creating crippling effects on the local ecosystem, because basically you're fertilizing the sea, and that means that there's a lot of plants and algae that can grow and thrive, but they are stealing oxygen to all the fish and shrimps and crabs and all the other animals around, so nothing can live there. And that's why it's called a dead zone. And that dead zone is just getting bigger and bigger. It's large like a Connecticut, one state in the US. But you have these dead zones because of the big rivers in all the other major parts of the other world. And just zooming out a little bit more to show you what has happened over the last 250 years, we can see that we have achieved a tremendous growth in population, in GDP, in investment, in urban population, in primary energy use. All of these trends are exponential. But that means that these socioeconomic developments have an impact on the environment. And we can see that that other side of the coin means that we're producing more and more carbon dioxide. We're putting more nitrogen and phosphorus into our land. We're producing more methane emissions. We're cutting down more forests. So this is just what's happening, but don't be depressed. There's a way out, and it's called circular economy. The best way to describe circular economy is to compare it with the current system, the linear economy that I talked about. It's the system that we live in today, where we, in order for us to buy our phone, someone has to mine the metals and create the plastics in different parts of the world. That's all assembled in China, shipped to us, we buy it and we use it. Sometimes only for a year or two, because then we want a new phone. And we put that old phone in a drawer or we throw it away. And most of it doesn't get recycled, and that's how we're losing those resources. That's how we're creating that negative impact on the environment. Whereas circular economy is the opposite of linear one. It's a system, it's a business strategy, it's a philosophy that promotes a world without waste. It promotes a world where waste is seen as a resource, and where waste and resources flow in perpetuous loops without loss of quality. And nature is a huge inspiration to us, because in nature there's no waste. One waste is another input for another process. What's important as well is not to mistake circular economy with so-called recycling economy. And that mistake is being done on all levels of our society. A lot of people think that we will just separate and recycle everything, but that's not the way forward, because we will never be able to collect everything that we put out there, and recycling of certain materials like plastics is inefficient and it's not working. We need a more holistic and radical change in the way we treat our resources. This is another diagram of looking at circular economy, a little bit more advanced. It's used by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, one of the most leading organizations in the world, which again offers a different way of looking at our materials. What's interesting is that it divides the flows into biomass flow and technical flow, and it tells us to separate these two when we can. And when we talk about the biomass flows, when the waste is produced, we need to turn it and close it in the cascades, close to the consumer, by turning the food waste into feedstock, or by extracting energy and fertilizers and putting them back to the loop. And then you have the technical cycle, again, when you talk about your phone, where the best way to do it is to keep it close to the user when it becomes waste by, for example, sharing, reusing, redistributing, refurbishing, remanufacturing, and only then recycling, with the idea of minimizing the leakage, the waste, and the negative externalities. Now, I would encourage you to go to Slido again. There's one more question for you. I will start sharing it in just a second. It's a question for you before I go on to other slides. And so you can connect again to the same link, go to slido.com, type that code 904463, and tell me, pick one option. What sectors do you think consume the most materials in the world? Is it packaging? Is it fashion? Is it healthcare, construction, mining, mobility? What do you think? It's great to see you all getting engaged in Slido. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing. I will stop the. Most of you voted food and agriculture, then fashion, then construction and demolition. And I will tell you on the slide what the sector is. This is a report that we do with Circular Economy every year. We measure how circular is our planet. We call it a Circularity Gap Report. We publish it at the World Economic Forum in Davos every year. And from what we see here is that this is the global X-ray of our economy when it comes to resources that are entering it and how are they consumed, and how much waste and emissions do they produce. And what we see here is that the big message is that we consume around 92 gigatons of resources every year as a whole planet, and only 8.4 gigatons make it back. In other words, our world is only 8.4% circular. And the reason for it largely is the construction and demolition sector. That consumes the most resources. You can think of all the sand, stone, clay, and so on. But then biomass and food is number 2. So I think a lot of you were actually super close, and some of you totally right. And here you see also the emissions that are connected with the material flows. So that's a bit of a different look at combining the circular economy with the climate change movement. I have to speed this up a little bit because I'm running out of time, but this is also, we don't like to focus only on pointing out the problem. We also love to say, what are the solutions out there? And so we came up with those interventions and strategies for changing that gap and closing it. And you can see here that, for example, the blue is the construction sector. What can we do there is, for example, resource efficient construction, reducing floor space, increasing housing durability, circular construction materials, resource efficient housing. And we see that the length of that diagram is how much materials can be saved, and that height and width of it is how much carbon footprint can be saved by doing it. And we see that there are other strategies for food and also the consumer goods sectors. Now, we also made a short video that I would like to share with you about the gap report. now. I hope you all saw it, and I'll have to speed up a little bit. To close this session, I also wanted to share with you some approaches to circular economy. But you know what? Actually, I will stop here. Let's open the space for Q&As. Let's give it a short break. I will stop sharing. I will come back to discussion because now it's time to have a short break.
There are no questions at this point. But one question regarding this supply chains and their length, basically. What is being done to reduce actually these supply chains? I mean, can you mention perhaps some cases or some scenarios where we see that some supply chains, as you mentioned, UK, something is being caught, then it's processed in China, and then basically is once again used in UK. Are there any changes with respect to how businesses operate? Have they shortened their supply chains? Do you see that?
Yeah, it's a good question. On a general level, no. It's just getting worse. But then there are great examples of what's changing. And I have some slides later on to show you what does it mean for business, how they're reacting today. Maybe it's happening in your country as well. For example, in Czech Republic, the construction company is telling you, well, there's no wood, the metal's doubled in price, you have to get a higher mortgage. So that's a huge market incentive for companies and the government to think, okay, what do we have here? Can we turn the waste into resource? Can we source the materials locally? So it is a trend that's starting to happen, both on a company level, city level, governmental level, that COVID especially, and now the actors to think differently about their supply chains. And it's a gradual trend that's happening, but still globally, nothing big is changing. And I have some examples to show you what are some companies doing or what can cities do as well in the next couple of slides.
Thank you. We have a question from Evolena. She has raised her hands.
Yes, thank you, Radka. I was actually wondering what is exactly circular economy doing? Is it because in my opinion there's a lot to be done on a political EU level, for instance, in terms of regulation of big polluters, of much more recycling, much more reusing, and actually starting where the real problem is, which is in the industry. Because let's be honest, individually we can only have a very, very limited impact in recycling our waste and our trash, for instance. So I was wondering, what do you think is the big solution there, and where should we really act?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have some slides later on as well to show about what is EU doing and so on. But quick answer is that there's a lot happening, on all levels of our society. So the big governmental players like China or EU, they have now comprehensive strategies and action plans that have a big impact on, for example, countries that are in the EU or the whole China and the global markets. Now we're just starting. So far the EU has been scratching the surface of the total benefits of circular economy. But for example, now they said they're limiting the amount of waste that you can landfill in the different countries. They're pushing for higher circularity and recycling rates. But more interestingly, last year they released a renewed circular economy action plan, which is going in much bigger depth into, for example, pushing producers to provide higher durability to what they're putting on market, pushing producers to design the products so they are repairable and designed for circularity. And those things will have a global impact because the European market is huge, and then even Chinese producers or US companies will have to abide by that. Maybe you saw, for example, a small example that circulated in the media last week when the EU said, hey, when you have your smartphone, if it's Apple or Android, they have to have the same charger because it's just wasting the potential, and people are changing the cables a lot. So they're trying to unify some standards. But there's also so much happening on a city level, on a company level. I have more examples about that. And when it comes to you as individuals, like I totally agree with you that as consumers, we don't have that high impact as individuals. I mean, sometimes you even have bad or worse choices. You go to a supermarket and you want to buy avocado, and it doesn't really matter if it's eco-certified or not. It still has kind of not the best impact on the environment. So I think the best thing that we can do as individuals to actually get engaged and think of how can I do circular economy or be more sustainable, not just in my household and when I go shopping, but in my work, what I do from Monday to Friday between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Because that's when you can have a huge impact in the organizations that you represent.
I have one more question from Ashraf Unisa. Can I individually calculate footprints in daily use or just startups?
Of course you can. There's plenty of things online. It's a topic which is evolving, so it's quite early still, but there are web pages that tell you, what's your carbon footprint based on what you shop. There are web pages that tell you how many slaves have you enslaved based on your shopping as well, which is a bit off topic, but also very, very important. And then a lot of companies are interested in calculating their carbon footprint. That's quite standard when you think of the energy that you use. So a lot of people will tell you, hey, if you switch from coal to solar, this is how much emissions you're saving. But it gets more difficult when you think of so-called consumption-based emissions. So the emissions that are embedded in products like your phone, your laptop, your couch, and calculating that impact, what impact does it have if you recycle it, or if you don't buy a new one, if you fix the next one. That's also an upcoming topic that, for example, we as Circular Economy are working together with London, focusing on the food flows that they have. But it's a new era. The topic of circular economy is rather new. It started 10 years ago, so all these tools and science is just starting to take off. Thanks and welcome back. It's a lot that I still want to show you and talk about, so I'll jump right into it by continuing with some of the slides that I couldn't share with you before. So now again, Radka, you see it? Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to show you some examples of, okay, how can we apply circular economy to different levels of our society? Because it's so important to understand that there are macro, meso, and micro levels. So when it comes to the macro level, I talked about in the Q&As about what the EU is doing. The nations are also doing a lot. But for example, from my experience with working with Prague, there's a lot we can do as cities. Cities have a huge role in transition towards a circular economy. And a concept of circular metabolism is a great way to look at it. And you have to approach it holistically and systematically by looking at, okay, what are the resources that the city needs to feed itself, to build, to provide energy, food, clothing, and what happens with them, how much waste is produced from different waste streams, and how can we cascade it, recover it, and reuse it inside the city before it becomes waste and before that waste leaves the city. And that's also a principle that you can apply on different levels. Circular metabolism, a great kind of a little tool that helps with a lot of decision making that we're doing in Prague. But you can also see that on a meso level, so when it comes to local ecosystems and industrial networks, there's a lot happening. And for example, the concept of industrial symbiosis is a largely popular theme in big industrial parks in Europe, in China, and all around the world, which is all about exchanging resources and waste and material flows inside an industrial park. What is an industrial park? Where you can think about it as like, okay, you have a city, and next to the city, there's usually a factory, there's usually a place which produces energy, and there are some manufacturing companies, various industries, and all these processes require energy, require water, and some materials, but also produce certain waste. And this scheme that you see here is from Sweden, from Norrköping municipality, where they're looking at this systematically and trying to identify different needs and waste outputs of those different stakeholders that are next or in the city, and they try to connect that and link it together so that whole ecosystem becomes more self-sufficient, better for the environment, and also can achieve huge cost savings. And circular economy, you can also apply it on a company level, product level, or inside households. This is an example from IKEA. This is a slide from their own corporate strategy. IKEA is one of the corporates that actually has huge ambitions. They want to be 100% circular by 2030, next to a couple other corporates, but they are really leading the way. And you can see from a business perspective, what's the rationale behind circular economy. Look at this couch. And the current way that it's been set up is that IKEA sells that couch to one customer. It costs 600 euros, and that's it. That's the value that IKEA creates. That's the money they get out of it. But if they go for circular economy, you can see that, well, it doesn't need to end that with that one sale. IKEA can also make sure that when you're done with that couch and bring it back to them, they can resell it again, maybe for half the price. And then maybe when you have that secondhand couch, it needs a new cover, and IKEA can sell it to you again. And maybe then you can still refurbish it and repair it. And that again comes with a price tag of 100 euros. And then that couch has 4 lives and 4 different customers throughout its lifetime before it ends up being recycled, which can also bring a little bit of revenue. So, and then instead of making 600 euros on that one couch and making more couches to supply that demand from people, you can still work with that one couch, serve more customers, and create more money. And again, zooming out a little bit about the positive aspects of this whole circular economy thing. Circular economy is the missing tool in solving climate change because, as I mentioned, as you saw from the previous slide as well, when you do those things on an industry level, city level, or couch level, all those things have emissions connected with it. So you save emissions when you give it a second life. You save emissions when instead of discarding it and buying a new one, you get a new cover. You save emissions when you refurbish it, and you save emissions when you recycle it instead of landfill it. And then when you apply this to the whole way that the world is operating, to all the supply chains and the industries, you can see that based on the calculations that have been made, circular economy interventions can save up to 45% of global greenhouse gas emissions, mostly related to food, steel, cement, plastic, and aluminum flows. And that's a huge link that circular economy is making in solving the climate change while making a lot of business sense. And that's why it's such a powerful concept, which is taking off rapidly. Now I'm moving into the other part of the session, but before I do, I would again like to invite you to Slido with a couple questions that I have prepared for you. You should see it now again. So please connect and tell us, what are you doing at home to be more circular and sustainable? Can you think of some examples that you are doing in your home, when you're in your office, that are sustainable and circular? Can you share that with us? So again, open Slido, it's the same room, same code as always, and let us know. I will give it 1 minute. Buying secondhand, that's my favorite one. Collecting food remains, super good. Composting, less packaging. We have 9 participants. Last time it was 20. I'll wait for a little more to answer. So again, open the Slido, type down the code and tell us what are you doing at home to be more circular and sustainable. And thank you for those that have already participated. We have a lot of secondhand initiatives and that's awesome. It's one of the most simplest things you can do and it saves a lot of money as well, and even time. Awesome, thanks a lot. Let's move to another one. Now this is a bit tricky. So I would like you to think, when you think of waste and the way we should approach it, can you sort out what should be done with waste? What do you think is the right hierarchy, the right pyramid of working with waste? What should come first? And you can rate these 5 strategies from what you think is the most impactful one to the least impactful one. Again, we are at 11 participants. That's a bit less than in the previous session. Again, if you have troubles connecting, let us know. But I will leave it here because we have to move on. We have 12, and that's amazing because you have worked it out. This is exactly how it should look like. We should start, the best waste is no waste. So the first rule of waste is not produce waste. So reduction of waste is key. But then when something is waste, then you should think of, can I fix it? Can I swap it? Then if you can't, go for the recycling. It's better than if it can be recycled to recover the energy from it by burning it, for example. And then the least preferable option is landfilling. Well done, everyone. And last question, before I jump into answering that question, are there any circular initiatives or companies that you are aware of? And just to let you know, this is what the session will be about for the remaining 30 minutes. Example from Coca-Cola, secondhand shops, food banks, that's a great case. Okay, I won't torture anymore. I think this is what I'm here to tell you as well, but I think you are doing great, and I think actually a lot of you are totally right about what you're writing down. So I will stop sharing and I will tell you what's in it for business and how to get engaged also personally. So since you saw that example of IKEA, that industrial park, now again, it's a lot of money that's in it for the EU. It's been a study in 2015 that estimated that if EU goes circular, it could generate about 1.8 trillion euros in annual net economic benefits compared to 2015. And examples could be in cars. This is a global estimate, but the cars itself, like there's a huge value in utilizing that, you know, when they're standing 93% of the time, there's a lot of business that can be done with that time and with optimizing that resource that's just standing out there. And the value of all the cars that are unused around the world at any given point in time is about $7 trillion a year, or in any time. Now, also when it comes to jobs, this is also where circular economy is really interesting, because when we talked about that waste hierarchy, and so when you build an incineration plant, that maybe needs 20 people to operate. and it can burn up to 500,000 tons of waste. When you landfill it, well, maybe you need more people to operate the landfill, but it's the worst thing you can do with waste. But it gets interesting when you go for recycling or even reusing. It just rapidly accelerates the jobs that can be created around treating waste differently. And it's also an initiative that we're running with Circular Economy called Circular Jobs. So if you're interested, go and check it out online. I'm happy to share more details with you about that. Now, back to your question, Radka, about, okay, what's happening with the global supply chains and what are the companies doing about this? This is a little bit of a complicated graph, but what you see in it is, okay, the price of things. So how did things get more expensive when you think of energy, food, fertilizers, metals, minerals, precious metals over the last 30 years? And you can see that the price of those stuff, that's those different gray and black charts, has been quite stable. But then it started rising since 2000. The red line shows, okay, how richer are we getting? So the GDP index. And the point of this graph is to tell you that the richer we get, the things get even more expensive. So for every 1% growth in GDP, the commodity price index rose by about 2%. And this huge spike that you see in 2008 by the biggest line in gray, it's the cost of organic, of the phosphorus and nitrogen fertilizers, which I told you that they are produced in only 3 countries that the EU is sourcing from. And the price of those in 2008 increased by 8 factors. And this is again an example that we touched upon in the Q&As from actually today. What we're seeing is that the price of things, of the raw materials, is increasing. And it's not only because of COVID, it's because we're running out of some of those things, and it's because those supply chains are becoming largely inefficient. And I'm sure that you are familiar with it from your own countries. It's related to everyone. Maybe it's also happening in your country that the price for gas, for example, is being increasingly more expensive in just the last couple of weeks, and people are going crazy. So that's why EU, China, but also the UN is doing a lot about circular economy. We've again touched upon that. EU has a whole strategy and a whole plan called Circular Economy Action Package. Now it's the 2nd edition of that. EU also sees circular economy as the major component of the Green New Deal. China has a 5-year-old strategy for circular economy that it renews every time. And Sustainable Development Goals by the UN also recognize circular economy as one of the key components. Now this is getting a little bit more interesting, I think. So there is plenty of examples of different initiatives around the world, but these are some of the high-level ones from the EU that perhaps some of you are familiar with or could be interested in getting in touch or following. This is a map of, let's say, the leading circular economy initiatives on a global level. I myself happen to be the co-founder of Institute of Circular Economy from Czech Republic. So I'm happy that's on the map. I didn't create that map, just as a disclaimer. And now, okay, talking about the businesses, we've touched upon the IKEA case. There are plenty of other cases. I wanted to share with you one more before I go into more systemic frameworks of approaching it, and that's Philips. Philips, maybe you know that company. Besides doing a lot of things in healthcare, they also produce light bulbs. But they started doing it a bit differently. They started in the Netherlands. Instead of selling that light bulb to you, and when you build, let's say, an office building, you need a lot of light bulbs. They said, you know what? We won't sell you those light bulbs. We will rent you the light. That means that Philips doesn't sell the light bulbs. They install everything. They take care of the maintenance. They take care of the energy bill, and they charge whoever owns that building a monthly fee for lighting, which is also connected to how much people actually use that light. So if you turn off the lights, you pay less. It's good for customers. They pay less. They only pay for actually the light that they consume. Minimum upfront investment costs for purchase and installment. And of course, it incentivizes Philips to design the light bulbs differently, because when you retain the ownership of the light bulb, you don't want to come there every week to replace it because it's a bad light bulb. You want to make the best light bulb, designed to be durable, reusable, and for recycling. And that's what Philips is doing. And it also achieved up to 50% energy savings for customers, so lighting services. And of course, it also taps into new markets for Philips because they are in touch with a customer for years. Their relationship with that office building doesn't end with that one sale of a lot of light bulbs. They're with each other for years and years and years. And that revenue keeps generating and increasing over time. But to give it a bit more structure, this is again what we produce at Circle Economy, the organization that I represent in the Nordics and the Central and Eastern Europe. We are a global non-profit impact organization. You know, we work with nations, with World Economic Forum, we work with companies and also cities. But this is our framework for businesses. So basically what you need to know is that we identified 7 key elements for circular economy businesses. It's wrapped around 3 key principles. So first, that's the inner circle, using waste as a resource, prolonging the lifetime of what you're putting on the market, and of course, prioritizing regenerative and renewable resources with the stuff that you make or the energy that you use to make those stuff. And then there are some 5 enabling principles that can make you reap the potential of the business. Sometimes you have to rethink the business model. When you make the best light bulb in the world, which doesn't break, well, maybe you won't make so much money if you just sell it to a client and then you go away. Maybe you make more money when you retain the ownership and you fix it like Philips is doing, but also IKEA with the couch. That's connected with the design. So when you want to use waste as a resource and prolong its lifetime, well, maybe you need to redesign the product that you're making so it actually fulfills those criteria. Digital technology has a huge role to play, and often you have to team up, even with your competitors, and advance the knowledge that's out there to be able to make it happen. And I prepared some examples about this framework, but it's all online. I will share this presentation with you. There are links. You can click on some of these pictures and it will lead you to the reports that are out there. But when it comes to the key principle for businesses to use waste as a resource, there are basically 3 sub-principles. Open loop. So basically you're using other industry waste to do something on your own. There's a closed loop system, which means that you are using your own waste within the same industry to make new things out of it. And there's also this other loop of recovering energy from waste and turning into fuels from other waste streams. And organic flows can be a great example. This is what we're doing in Prague. This is a car that's now driving in Prague, which runs on bio-CNG made out, and that bio-CNG is a gas that we collected from human feces. Pretty cool. But our plan is to power the whole waste management truck fleet from the bio waste that the citizens produce. So instead of burning it, we want to collect it and put it in a biogas plant, get biogas out of it, and then pump it in the cars that are collecting that food waste. That's how we close the loop. When it comes to stretching the lifetime, again, there's so many examples out there. You yourself mentioned that you're engaged in secondhand activities, and I think that's the best thing. But when it comes from a company perspective, there are 3 things that you should keep in mind. You either maximize the lifetime of your products during use by enabling people to repair the things that they own, upgrade it, maintain it. Or you stretch the lifetime after people are done with the product. So when they're done, if it cannot be repaired, upgraded, or maintained, you can still make sure that it gets refurbished, remanufactured, recycled by taking it back to your processes, or by using bioproducts. And this is an example of a Fairphone. You know, it's the first circular phone out there. I don't have it, there's a fourth generation of them. And that Fairphone is designed for repair. You can upgrade it. You can easily change the battery. It's not like iPhones where basically the company really forces you to buy new stuff over and over and over all the time. It's a different business model. And when it comes to prioritizing regenerative resources, you can think of running on renewable energy, saving water, but also using materials that you know are renewable or regenerative. And this is my favorite example, which is a little bit further away from the topic of circular economy. It's a company called Cradle, and it's a Swedish startup which works on a way that it crowdfunds from micro investors, and it raises funds to build solar panels in African villages. And then it comes to an African village, it installs the panels so people can have a light, and they don't have to buy kerosene or gasoline to still, use it as a different source of lightning in their homes. And it's great business for everyone. You as a crowdfunder get a return on your investment. Trine is making a lot of money, but also the African villagers are saving on not buying kerosene for the lamps, but installing those solar panels. There are also these 5 other enabling principles. Design for future. There's a big example of SpaceX, for example, which started making reusable rockets instead of single-use rockets. When you think of rethinking the business model, it's often about maintaining ownership of what you're putting out there and renting it as a service, renting it as a light, renting it per use. And this is a Dutch startup which, instead of you having to buy a washing machine, it rents you high-level, super classy washing machine, and you pay only a monthly fee to use it. And of course, more people can use it in a household or in a neighborhood as well. When it comes to digital technology, there's a Czech startup, a friend of mine started that, it's called Circle, and it's a marketplace for waste where companies can upload their waste and other companies can buy it. Teaming up to create joint value. I think libraries of things or swap events or secondhand markets are the best example of that. And there's a lot out there about strengthening and advancing knowledge, and I will tell you more about it a little bit later. This is a little bit more advanced summary of those core elements, their description, the strategies, and in-depth examples of what it can be. It's all sourced from a so-called knowledge hub that we are running as Circular Economy. You can go there, you can check it out, you can play with it and get inspired. So I won't go so much into depth, just to tell you there's a lot out there in case you want to dig deeper. And of course, there's so many other different frameworks. This is just one that I shared with you. But for example, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, also the leading organization in circular economy besides our organization, has a different framework called Resolve, where they say you should regenerate, you should share, you should optimize, you should loop, you should virtualize, and you should exchange. And there is also some examples and companies are doing that. But there's so much out there on the internet that I'm sure that if you're interested, go there and check it out for yourself. Now I'm moving to, let's say, the last part of the session, which is now connected to you. If you want to get engaged with the topic, what can you do and where can you start? So I tried to pick some of the most interesting examples and initiatives that I think could bring a lot of value to you. Doesn't matter what starting point you are. I would like you to encourage to watch this TED Talk. It changed my life. It's by William McDonough about Cradle to Cradle design, which is basically the mother of circular economy. It's 15 minutes. This guy is a really, really famous architect who talks about what he's done in China, what he's done in Ford, and why does it matter. When I watched it, I was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna be doing for the rest of my life, and I do that. And there's a lot more on TED. It's free. You can watch it with subtitles in different languages. If you're interested, start there. Then I told you about the Knowledge Hub. So those examples of the case studies and that framework that we use, these 8 principles of circular economy, it's all tailored in our Knowledge Hub. Again, accessible for free. I will send you this presentation, or the organizers will, and you can click on that. So, and it will lead you to their website. I connected it with links. So if you are like, okay, interested in waste as a resource strategy, you can just type it down and you will see there's thousands and thousands of different examples that you can get inspired with, or maybe if you're running a workshop yourself, use it as a case study. Really cool thing that the MacArthur Foundation is doing is called Circular Design Guide. It's a website which offers a lot of different workshops that you can be doing at any stage. You know, either you're a startup, you're SME, you want to make a workshop in your municipality, and they have it all there. They have sheets, they have how you should proceed, who should we invite. It's super practical, down to earth, Circular Design Guide. I encourage all of you, if you're interested, use that website. I've been using it a lot and haven't regretted it ever since. And then of course there's a lot of courses on circular economy online for free. Again, those links, those are just not logos. You can click on that when you get that presentation. It will guide you to these courses out there. It's starting level, it's more advanced. Some of them are for free. If you want a license, you know, like that you can promote yourself with on LinkedIn, or you have to pay, but a lot of them are for free in case you're just interested in that know-how and more experience. Now, there are also some tools that, besides these frameworks and knowledge platforms, which are super interesting, there are some tools that you can use to assess others. You know, if you get a request, or maybe you're thinking, how can I start doing circular economy business, or how can I bring this to my company? Well, you should check out some of these toolkits out there. We have one called Value Hill. It's super interesting, a little bit complicated to read, but if you really are into the topic, check it out. It talks about, you know, how do you set up a circular business model in a given company, and why, and how should you explain it. Then there is Circulytics by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is, I think you have to pay for that, but you can also be part of their testing cohort. So it's for big companies to assess, you know, where I am with circular economy, what are my indicators. And there's also plenty of others, but I think the most interesting one is by World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Again, pretty interesting organization itself. It's called CTI Framework. And now how to get engaged. Again, a couple topics that could be interesting for you to know, and good starting points. If you maybe need to build your curriculum, or if you need to, if you think like, okay, I need to promote myself a little bit, you know, if you need to work on your brand, there are good starting points which doesn't require anything from you, only to sign up, register, and you can start by, for example, becoming a member of Circular Economy Club. I am the member of Circular Economy Club. It's a big network with a huge newsletter. They also have courses for you to do and get certified quickly, easily, and almost for free, and even for free sometimes. But what's also interesting about Circular Economy Club is that you can become a local organizer. So let's say you live in Macedonia, in a city, and you want to throw an event on circular economy. Well, instead of promoting it on Facebook with your friends, you can also sign up at Circular Economy Club, become the local organizer. They will equip you with different ideas and presentations of what you can do. They will put you on a map. They will put your logo, your name out there on the web, and suddenly the whole rest of the world sees that there is something happening in Macedonia, and you don't need to pay anything, and you don't need to go through any course. It's what a lot of people are doing to, you know, if you want to be more visible in the scene, I would say become the member of Circular Economy Club and become the local organizer. There's also these circular economy hotspots, which you can become the member of. If you are, or you can also follow it as a private person. There's a link to a Dutch circle hotspot, which is the birth of all the other hotspots in Europe. This map is a little bit outdated. There's more happening out there. There's also Ellen MacArthur Foundation is running a whole community for different people to get engaged, even students, you know, young professionals, experts. and you can sign up for their partnership program. I think last year a lot of people did it, where you register, and if you get selected based on your CV, they will onboard you in a 6 weeks course that will train you in circular economy. You will get a license that you're certified by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and again, that's a great thing on your CV and future career. And if you are from the Visegrad 4, I hope some of you are. I think you are. Check out Visegrad for Sustainability, V for SDG. It's also a platform for sustainability experts to get engaged on a volunteer basis, get inside the network, and start working with each other. Now, before I move to the Q&As, because I'm reaching the end of my session, I have a couple last things for you to run with on Slido. That's the last thing. It will take a few minutes, and then we'll go to the Q&As. So you should again see the slideshow now. It's a quick question. So after today, what you've heard, do you feel like you want to get engaged in the circular economy? And it's just 5 stars. If you really don't want to, say no thanks. But if you are inspired, you should go for the option 4 or 5. Okay, we have 6 respondents, 7. It's a quick answer, doesn't hurt. 9, that's great. I like it. It's interesting, no, everyone is afraid to say no thanks. You don't have to be afraid, But it's great to see that a lot of you actually are really interested to get engaged. Okay, let's give it 10 seconds. Maybe there's someone else who wants to vote on Slido. How much? A question to you. Pick even a couple options. What do you need more to get started? This is really interesting. It's all about a networking, right? Okay, inspiration, know-how, ideas. Really cool to see this. Super helpful for me as well to know what to focus maybe on next time. Thanks a lot for voting. This is super interesting. Inspiration, know-how, network, ideas. 3 key things for you to get started. Good to know, and I hope at least some of those things have been helped with or solved a little bit today. It's just scratching the surface, but hopefully it provided some value to it. Quick question to you, where do you see the biggest potential for you to get started? 1 word, couple words, share it with us. Where do you think you could start? What are you thinking of doing? Okay, I can't read that.
Household.
households, families, motivation. Mindset, finding a niche. A lot of talk about motivation. Really cool. Thanks for sharing. And I think just a last question to you before we wrap this up and go to Q&As. Which part do you think was the most helpful one? Can you let me know? Thanks a lot. Awesome. That's really good to know. I hope it was of value. And with this, I'm ending the Slido. I'm also ending my presentation and I'm opening up for the Q&As. Just so you know, I also share with you my contact details in the chat. You can reach me over email, via LinkedIn. This presentation will be available to you. And now for the next 10 minutes, we can also address some of the questions that might pop up during today. And thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for this presentation and for sharing the best practices. This was really awesome and really a huge amount, ample of knowledge that we actually need to swallow, I would say, because there is a lot going on. This is what is, and this is a good news, okay? This is a very good news that it's a lot going on. So thanks very, very much for this. We have a question from Gokce. Could you please share the source of the job creation statistics? You know, when you were talking about job creation on 10 tons of used goods, you know, 1 job incinerator, 6 jobs landfill. What is the source of the statistics?
Yes. This is the link to our initiative, and in one of these reports it's out there, so feel free to browse through it. There are a couple of reports, and I think in some of them it's mentioned and the way we calculated it, so check it out. It's in the chat now.
Okay. So, dear participants, this is basically the time to ask questions if you have any. I know that you perhaps are tired. We have been listening to a lot of topics, and any questions popping up for Wojtek? Carla, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. If you wanted to say something. No. Okay. You definitely need to share the presentation with us, because I'm sure that many of us want to see these videos and TEDx talks and everything, because we definitely it's ample of sources you have given us. So this was you really have done an extensive research. You really are in depth into the topic, and you know, this is like a concentrate, you know, that we need to basically dilute with a lot of thinking and a lot of seeing. So thank you so much for sharing everything, you know, with us. This was really wonderful. Any questions? Okay, if there are none, I would just to sort of, you know, listening to you, Wojtek, and not just to Wojtek, but also starting from the beginning, from our Dana, when, you know, she was talking about the household management. It's sort of, forgive me, I'm also the economist, like Candice. I'm actually teaching it. So, it basically reminded me, and I think this could be also a great source to recap today's day. The beginning of the word economics is actually from oikos and nomos, so it's basically household management. And through many of the topics I have actually listened to today on literacy and on circular economy, it sort of reminded me of the concept of grandma universities, and this is not basically my idea. This is the wonderful concept of famous environmentalist Vandana Shiva, in India, who said that perhaps in this world we should return to the grandma universities, to the wisdom of our grandmothers, because first and foremost they were the best managers in the world. They had scarce resources and they basically managed to bring up 5, 6, 10 children in the household. They were usually not working, but nevertheless they basically managed. And if somebody is a champion of circular economy, I think it was our grandmas and great grandmas. They were the ones who, at least most of us, they taught us some principles of circular economy, of reuse, of basically repair. Many of us, I'm sure, have grown up with these concepts of circular economy in our households as such. So definitely, I think we need to go back to old wisdom that we had, and we somehow, through this globalization, through this consumerism, through this fast pace of life, I have a feeling we somehow have maybe forgotten it, or maybe neglected it, or maybe we don't have time, or we sort of thought it wasn't important. But I have a feeling that we are slowly getting back to the old wisdom that we basically have, with new technologies, with new solutions. And Wojtek basically is the representative of the new era, with his initiatives and his research. And as you see, there is this whole new world that I wasn't aware of, doing a lot of wonderful stuff related to circular economy as such. So sorry. What did you want to say? Sorry.
I think it's so interesting to listen to the concept of grandmas and great grandmas, and I totally agree. And I would even take it step further and say the Mother Nature is our immense source of inspiration for how to treat our resources, how to operate for billions of years in the way that it's been sustainable and prosperous for everyone living on a planet. I think we can learn a lot from those principles and try to apply them to the way we work, we design our products and services, and we do business. But I totally agree that the grandmas, they're the best, and they knew their stuff, and we need to go back to that know-how for sure.
Definitely, we need to basically. I always tell this to my students, that the best manager in the world was their grandma, So we should go back to the wisdom of grandma's university. We should have more of that. I think we can learn a lot from them. I know I learned from my grandma. And I'm coming back to it. As I'm getting older, I'm actually coming back to it more and more, If there are any more, are there any more questions for Wojtek? I don't think so. So I think we will call it a day.